And welcome to another edition of the Spoiler Room. I will say before we get started on our next 25th anniversary special where we're covering Steven Seagal 1990 films, a PSA from the Spoiler Room first. Don't go see Vacation. Thank you. Now, on to today's show, which we have a great crew here in the room to talk some Seagal films from the 90s. Let's see if I can do this right. Okay, so first we have here Cole Meredith, who's taking us to the bank, the blood bank. Hi, Cole.
Glad to be here, man.
Good to see you. And then, with superior attitude, is Dawn. Hello, Dawn.
Good evening.
That's great. I feel your pain. And now we have superior frame of mind, Gabriel, Stuffed Burrito Entertainment. How are you, Gabe?
I'm talking like a typical Seagal villain. Yeah. Damn throat, but I'm happy to be here.
And then, man, his magic is bigger than in all of us. He is the one and only Scotty D. Hello, Scott.
I'm fun, man.
Yeah, man.
I actually even have a themed beverage tonight because I know that we are going to be covering Marked for Death as one of the movies, which is a the Steven Seagal versus Jamaican gangs thing.
Yes.
So hold on a second. I have my 6-pack of Red Stripe here.
Oh, jeez.
And now I don't know if this is the same, if this comes from the same batch as the rows and rows of Red Stripe you saw him running past towards the end of Marked for Death, but knowing how long this stuff keeps and what this stuff tastes like, probably, yeah.
It's probably from that same warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, tonight it is our sixth 25th anniversary, I believe. 6th 25th anniversary special, where we're covering films from 1990, and we picked 2 films from 1990. And it just so happens that actors, we didn't have quite the pool of actors that we do nowadays. So Seagal ended up coming up with 2 action films, and we're going to cover them in the order that they were released that year. So first one on the list tonight is Hard to Kill. Now, Hard to Kill is this action film starring not only Steven Seagal, but Kelly LeBrock and William Sandler. And we have Mason Storm, played by Seagal, a go-it-alone cop who is gunned down at his home. The intruders kill his wife, and they think they've killed both Mason and his son, too. Mason is secretly taken to a hospital where he spends several years in a coma. His son, meanwhile, is growing up. Well, way to throw the spoiler right in the frickin' description, IMDb. His son, meanwhile, is growing up thinking his father is dead. When Mason wakes up, everyone is in danger. Himself, his son, his best friend, his nurse, and the guy on the street selling newspapers. But most of all, those who arranged his death are in trouble because he's out for blood at the blood bank. So we've got we've got Hard to Kill here, which is, I don't know. The impression I got from this film initially, we had Die Hard come out, and this had just an inkling of Die Hard as far as how tough his character was supposed to be. But let's just get initial thoughts on Hard to Kill. Cole, Hard to Kill. How do you feel about my movie?
Well, I'm actually a huge Seagal fan, just because he and I see eye to eye environmentally, I think, which is huge for me. So I could always watch these movies with my mom even, and we would enjoy them together because there's something else going on that I didn't get from Van Damme or Don the Dragon Wilson. I mean, Seagal is from an era of action stars that were kind of on the horizon when we weren't interested in our heroes being patriots anymore, which is what Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of made their careers off of. But sometime in the late 80s, it began to not be as cool, and you had this whole new wave of action people like Brandon Lee, like Van Damme, like Seagal. And I always like Seagal's films the best. By far, Brandon Lee being the exception, but Brandon only did a couple movies. But all that being said, Hard to Kill, I never got into then, and I definitely don't get into now. And I think all of the problems that are in this film are remedied in the next one we're going to review.
Sure.
But it's just, and I know, they just basically chopped this movie to hell, too. There's the beginning and the ending scenes are basically just removed. I mean, with nothing to replace them, which is the funeral of his partner and an opening scene with him and his family. So if it feels, really brutal and shallow, that's probably because it is. I would compare it to like Beverly Hills Cop 3 as an action movie. The action is ridiculous. I mean,
Sure.
I cannot even count how many times he goes, "Get down!" and like they die. Like, several times. And I don't know. I love Seagal. I don't know if they were toying with him being a sex symbol or something because they give him 2 sex scenes, which to me is weird. I want to see Seagal kicking ass. That's why they didn't give Eddie Murphy sex scenes for the
You
long.
want to see him kick ass and not grab ass. That's
Yeah, exactly.
That was his signature move, wasn't it? He'd pull the lady close, and then his hand would move down and grab a cheek. And I think he does that in like every single one of his movies. But
short story long, I don't like Hard to Kill. I would put it. I mean, it's this and Half Past Dead in terms of his 3 theatrical releases are really the only 2 I don't get into.
Sure. And Dawn, what about you? Hard to Kill. How do you feel about Hard to Kill?
I didn't mind it so much when it came out. Like Cole said, it's very much a break away from that patriotic hero kind of, and it brings us it brings people more back to like the Charles Bronson kind of not ordinary man kind of hero, because Steven Seagal's character is certainly not ordinary, but it does kind of bring you back to that defending your family and your friends kind of hero, defending your neighborhood, defending your basic neighborhood community, rather than saving the world kind of hero.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit smaller scale.
Yeah, so there's definitely, I can definitely see the appeal with that and the change. I think Hard to Kill was kind of made to draw the women in, and that's why they had the softer side. And I think, seriously,
I'm sorry.
It's really stupid, but I that's why else would they have? And like Cole said, trying to make him a sex symbol kind of thing. That's to broaden the audience, so that he's not just. Yeah. I really think that's what this movie was about, was to show a softer side, to try to experiment with bringing that female audience in.
Yeah.
Because as I was still a teenager at the time this movie came out. I had no idea that Marked for Death existed, but I remember this one. And the only reason I can think of it was that either the whole Steven Seagal, Kelly LeBrock romance in real life thing, or the fact that it was promoted and it was a softer kind of more push on the romance movie. Regardless, it's a Steven Seagal.
It's still a Steven Seagal.
It's a formulaic thing, and it doesn't. You know what you're getting when you get a Steven Seagal movie.
And also, let's face it, folks. As far as sex symbols go, Seagal isn't exactly ripped.
No,
but
he's not.
He was not Beefcake Factor in this one, was he?
No, he wasn't. And as a matter of fact, all I could think of, I know Aikido. I understand what Aikido is. It's using your opponent's momentum against them.
Mm-hmm.
But when he moves, it is fluid, but he also looks like he's got a stick shoved up.
That's in every film. I mean, you know,
It's not attractive.
well, it's in every film though. It's like, I'm hurting pain now. I'm going to kick your butt now. I'm happy now. I'm okay. I'm like, he has one mode for his facial expressions. But I can definitely see where you're coming from with that, Don. What about you, there, Mr. Gabriel? How are you on Hard to Kill?
Well, I mean, as a kid, I loved pretty much any movie with shooting and punching and killing. It
Sure.
took a lot for me to not like an action movie. And this movie came out when I was 9, and my dad had rented it. Um, you know, the glory days of the video store. He rented it, and I watched it with him. I guess we had like a unwritten tradition. When the new Steven Seagal movie came out, we rented it and we watched it together. He became a big fan of Seagal, and because of that, I became a fan. I actually, this is how naive I was. As a kid, I thought Seagal was like the coolest action star out there. Little did I know that there were people like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee out there in foreign countries that were kicking ass, while this guy just basically stands there and, you know, counterattacks. But anyway, I liked Hard to Kill when I saw it, and I grew up watching it. You know, we bought it on VHS. We bought every Seagal movie on VHS.
Yeah, me too,
Sure.
man.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they came out on sale, bam, we went to go get them. But the funny thing is we kind of didn't need to, because Hard to Kill was one of those movies that was always on HBO.
It was.
And I would always watch it. I would always watch it on HBO. I mean, he did have kind of like this way about him where, you know, it was kind of confident. Now it seems more arrogant than it was back then. But back then, I don't know. I guess I just kind of liked his, I guess, bravado or whatever. I don't know. It's the ponytail. It's just, you know, it's all the ponytail. I remember liking the film because he was just so cool and calm. You know, that scene in the liquor store. You know, where he's, you know, I still love that scene, even though it's like the worst acted scene in history. But it used to crack me up because it's like, oh shit, look at this tall white guy kicking the shit out of cholos and little essays, you know, little wannabe badasses, and so yeah, I like that kind of stuff. And you know, I always grew up thinking, oh my god, this is such a cool action movie. I watched it constantly on HBO and VHS. I thought that, you know, because at the time, you know, I was little, so it's like, okay, look at this guy, you know, kicking ass, having sex with all these hot women. I mean, damn, this guy's a pro. So I really enjoyed it when I was younger, and you know, I went a long time without watching this movie, and well, earlier this year it was like for $5 on Blu-ray at some store or whatever. I bought it and I watched it. This is kind of the reason why I wanted to be on this this podcast, because it's like the perfect timing. I go and buy this movie, and then you announce the podcast for this movie. So I gotta do this. I gotta do it. I watch it, and I'm like, this movie is actually fucking boring. It's really boring. I mean, all the serious action does not happen until an hour and 5 minutes in. Literally, after an hour is when all the action happens. I'm sitting there thinking, why did I like this movie in the first place? And then Kelly LeBrock, holy shit! No wonder why that woman can't act. No wonder why she doesn't act anymore. She's probably not even allowed to be on a studio. Oh my god! I don't even know how these two fell in love and got married. She must have. That left cheek must have been very inviting. Because, Oh God, I can't stand her acting. And it's funny too, because when I was younger, I actually felt sympathy for the character. He lost his family. Well, his wife was killed.
Yeah.
His son was taken from him. And I felt bad. And the way the movie plays out, I don't give a shit, to be honest. I mean, if anything, him getting out of that coma kind of brought more danger to the kid.
Yeah.
Selfish bastard! How dare he wake up? Um, but the nostalgia in me still kind of likes the movie in a way. I do like the action sequences that are in the film. But I have a soft spot for any, old school action sequence, where you actually get to see people get shot and not have the camera tilt or shake all about, So anytime I actually get to see actual squids being blown out, I appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
But I will say that even though I don't have the same feelings that I used to have for this movie, I will say that the absolute coolest moment in this film, at least, you know how when the good guy kills the bad guy, he always has something cool to say.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, I love the honesty of when he kills the guy that finally that pulled the trigger on his life. He stabs him with a broken cue in the chest and says, "That's for my life. Fuck you and die." I mean, that is awesome right there. That is pure honesty. Like, you kill my wife, fuck you. That's like the most memorable moment for the entire film. But yeah, used to be a great movie in my opinion, but now I'm not as naive as I used to be. So
Yeah, you mentioned that scene in the liquor store. Did you notice how all the fighting took place on the mats?
Yeah.
there's black mats on the floor that are supposed to be like for like some liquor stores have, but it's only where all the guys fell. I just watch it. I'm like, are those black mats on the floor? They don't cover the whole floor. They're just wherever you have the fight scenes where that's where they had a black mat. Wow, that's convenient at the store. Scott, what about you, sir? Your feelings with Hard to Kill?
Well, I never really got too into Steve Seagal. I'll admit it. And my brother was really into him. My older brother, he really liked Steven Seagal a lot. He took martial arts and everything, and he was really into. He didn't take a keto, but he was really into him. He thought he was really awesome. I never really got into him. And I will precede this by saying that I have actually seen 3 Steve Seagal films in the last week because I screwed up at first and said, "Mark, I just got done watching Out for Justice. Why did we watch that? That came out in '91." He's like, "We're watching Hard to Kill." I'm like, "Ah, shit." That was an extra 90 minutes of ponytail and squinting. But so anyway, I go back to watch Hard to Kill, and now I actually would like to see a lot of his movies over again, to be honest with you. Because I didn't hate this movie entirely. I really didn't. I didn't think it was that great either. I thought it was a very, very, very standard early 90s action film. Very standard. I think you could have put a lot of people in this part, and you would have just changed the fighting style, and that would have been it. You could have put Jeff Wincott in there. He would have been fine. The next movie I watched after this happened to be Street Night with Jeff Wincott, so I was actually thinking of him. I think it was Jeff Wincott. I don't know.
Just Speakman.
Yeah, neither here nor there. Jeff Speakman, thank you. Jeff Speakman, thank you, Gabe. Yeah,
I know because he only had 2 theatrical movies, and that was one of them.
Yeah, and I knew I screwed that up. Thank you, Gabe. Yeah, Jeff Speakman. So it could be any of those guys in this movie and stuff. And I was watching this movie, and now I haven't seen any of his movies in a long time. I haven't seen Above the Law in a very long time. I remember Above the Law being an anomaly in the action movie films. We had tons of action movies in the 80s and early 90s, and we had lots of action stars. We don't really have them anymore. We don't at all. Every now and then, a straight-to-video thing comes out, but even those are usually with older heroes and stuff like that, Jason Statham tried to kickstart it, but he was basically kind of supporting the entire industry all by himself. So that's why he was in like 4 or 5 movies a year. And it's like, anybody want to give me a break? Maybe take this next movie? No, shit. So we don't really have it anymore. I wish we did. Now, I haven't seen Above the Law in a long time, but I remember Above the Law being an anomaly because it was more sophisticated. It had more of a story.
It still holds up, brother. You should watch it.
I think I'm going to. I know Andrew Davis directed it and stuff, and he's a solid director. So when Hard to Kill came out, I remember even back then when I watched it, I thought, this is a lot cheesier. This is a lot more of like a standard action movie than Above the Law. This is a basic, by the numbers, you could put him in there. I think it was Gabe. Gabe, I think you mentioned that there's not a lot of action in the first hour of the movie, and I think that's the whole reason you have that liquor store scene. Because let's face it, is that scene ever referenced ever again? No, it had no purpose being there. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that they shot it after the fact, after all the filming was wrapped up, to say, he doesn't actually do anything.
Well,
can we have him do something before the coma?
Well, not only that, but in that scene too, it's like they're celebrating the fact he took out the essays and all that, but the store owner got shot.
The store owner gets blown away. Yeah, no one cares.
No, but our guy Storm took a bottle of champagne and monkeys out of the store because, hey, the guy's dead, so screw it.
I mean, did you even pay for that champagne yet, or did you just like, well, I don't know who to leave the bill with. I had 5 bottles of this. Yes, I did. That's how much I paid for. What, are you going to deny me this? And it's a really standard thing. Kelly LeBrock absolutely got a lot of the romance in there. I actually don't know if they actually had. I mean, I know they had a love scene. The way they framed it, I don't know if they actually had sex though, because it almost made it look like he was imagining it afterwards. If you look at it, he's like, it's back to him just sitting by himself and looking at his wedding ring, and you could either read it that he's like feeling a little guilty because of that, because he did do it, or you could read it that is he ready to move on with his life because of this? You could read it 2 ways. So I think that they brought that in there. The thing I want to really mention though is the villain, William Sadler. Now these action movies. The thing is that when they would make these bad guys in these movies, they started out having your regular average bad guys, like a bad drug dealer, a bad gangster. Eventually, they just started making like these people just impossibly evil. And so you have this guy who's he eventually becomes a state senator, but he had the other senator murdered along with everybody else on his plane through his mob ties, and he laughs and and is just like this evil twisting thing. And he's like, you were mentioning the I don't think he's necessarily an anti-patriotic person, but he certainly doesn't wear that on his sleeve,
Mm-hmm.
However, I did notice that God, they actually, they'll go out of the way to make this politician look like a real dickhead. And honestly, you combine, and I noticed that I think they were actually taking a couple shots at Bush Sr., who was in office at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not Bush Jr. Bush Jr. was still doing lines of coke off sorority girls, but when this movie came out. But Bush
because
Sr.
you had the news clip in there where they're talking about how he's being a everyman type of guy where
he's throwing out and it's all the news bites that people used to make fun of him for, the throwing out the pitch and the kissing the pig thing. At that time, that was what we had to make fun of him for because Dana Carvey hadn't really landed yet.
Yeah.
And they got that. And if you notice, the guy who is the actual senator, he actually has in one of his campaign ads that they listen to. You hear "No new taxes."
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. I mean, it's like it would be like having as your villain, like if the movie was a couple years later, having Bill Clinton shoot a woman in the chest and say, "I felt her pain." You know, I mean, like, or today Donald Trump cutting someone's head off. You're fired. You know, it's like that. I mean, it was really kind of overt.
Crap,
And
I want to see that now.
yeah, I know. Well, you know, just wait. It's gonna happen. I'm sure they'll put it in Sharknado 4.
Yeah.
But the you know, honestly, so that and also the villain also leads to the biggest problem of the movie because how do they know who he is without looking at the video? His catchphrase.
Yeah, he uses his catchphrase. That's what I loved about this film is like our crack super cop took him a half hour or in movie time like a day or 2 or 8 after his montage of getting happy of, oh yeah, that's him. I recognize the catchphrase now. I'm like, wait, dude, like it took you this long to realize, you know, the show me the money line, or you take that to the bank. Excuse me, that's the link. Oh my God, I'm like, it took you that long.
This is a guy who uses his campaign slogan in average day-to-day conversation years before it becomes a campaign slogan. And he continues to use it in all of his ads. And not only does it take him a while, if you remember, his old partner says, "Man, I must have listened to that tape a million times. I can't figure it out." I'm like, 8 years? You're supposed to be super cop? You can't figure out that the one guy who is saying that. I mean, come on. If Steve Urkel planned a hit, you couldn't see his voice, you couldn't see his face, but then you hear, "Did I do that?" You'd know it was Steve Urkel. You can't figure. I mean, it's one of those great, like, you know, and honestly, I don't hate the movie for it. I mean, I actually love it when this kind of thing happens because it's like one of those moments where you're like, just the dumbest freaking thing ever. Oh, it's like I should have buckled up for that one. I should have expected it. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's, oh my God. So he was like this impossibly evil person and everything like that, and then it's up to Steven Seagal to get him in. You mentioned the Aikido stuff. I don't do Aikido. I don't know about Aikido. I'm sure it is very formidable, and I'm sure he can probably kick my ass with it. I'm downright positive, in fact. I'm a pudgy, out-of-shape man with no strength or skills whatsoever. However, in these movies, a lot of time the Aikido comes across as the sacred art of breaking people's arms and knocking people into stuff. You know, I mean, that's basically all it is. Like every time, because it's basically somebody else makes the attack. I think Dawn, you mentioned that it was using other people's momentum against them, so that makes
Correct.
sense. So they come up there, twist, knock them, and it's always like something that they break. You know, they knock them into a duvet or a table or out a window, like, psh, 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 psh. You know, like maybe like ever. Does anybody just say, you know what? Maybe we should just shoot them.
Well, they do run out of bullets in this movie.
His shirt is open all the time. I mean, it's a it's a target. I mean, he might as well like put like a little bullseye on his nipples because they're always showing in these movies.
Wow, the picture you are painting of Steven Seagal tonight. God.
Hey, you know what? You add that to your Seagal voice, man, and that's gonna give somebody a sweaty.
But well, this was at the same year that this came out. William Sadler was also playing another bad guy in a lot better action film in Die Hard 2. So it was like the year of William Sadler being bad guys.
And again, that was another impossibly evil person. He kills like 250 people on a plane in that movie.
Yeah, but you're right because our heroes seem to be a little more invincible. They felt the need to up the ante on our villains. You know, we've come a number. It's only been a few years, but we've come a while from our Hans Gruber to where he has a lot of minions carry out his dirty work for him. And in here, you do have that where his minions carry it out. But I love everyone's impression on this film. I would just want to say, though with an action film, you kind of want to feel at least a little bit of peril for your hero, even though he got shot, even when he's getting shot in his home. At no time did I feel that his character was really threatened. And it
No.
sounds bad, but I don't know if it was Seagal's acting. Am I off on this? Or at no time do you worry at all about his character? I mean...
No, I worried about all the people around him. I knew that they were walking targets.
Yeah.
You know, every single person that ever befriended this person, is just like walking with a big target on them.
Wouldn't you say, Cole, that at no time do you really feel like there's a vulnerability to our hero, even when he gets shot in his bedroom, and somehow the newspaper clipping got a shot of the crime scene before it was broken down?
I agree, but that I think that's, I mean, of all the flaws of the film, I mean, that's not a significant flaw to me personally, because that's the way these things were done.
Sure.
You know, to me, I mean, and I mean this with, I've seen them all at least twice. I've seen every Don the Dragon Wilson movie, every Van Damme movie. I mean, I've seen them all, every movie from this era multiple times. So that didn't, I mean, I think Scott hit the nail on the head, which is the opening scene where they butcher his family is extremely brutal. And I just want to say, you know, the overemphasis on evil, especially in politicians, I think, again, I think that's Seagal. I think that is very much Seagal. I think all of his villains, I mean, they may be cartoonish, but I think if you look at the villains in Seagal movies and then look at the villains in Van Damme movies, I think you're going to see a very distinct difference in terms of one is a little bit more tangible. You know, and I think William Sadler's character, I don't know, I watched Die Hard 2 again recently, and that movie does not, I mean, it opens with him in a nude scene, like...
Yeah, I did a nude kata in that thing.
Die Hard 2 hasn't aged so well for me, but I love that series. But I digress. You're right, there was never any... I mean, that's just kind of Seagal, I mean, his thing, you know, I don't think that's a flaw. The flaw is in... The action sequences aren't well done. I mean, I can't wait to talk about the next film, because it's the polar opposite. But at no point, I mean, did I feel like anybody was getting hit or shot or hurt. It was all very phony. Like I said, it was very Beverly Hills Cop 3. I mean, John Landis could have directed this for all of the...
Yeah, I think Bruce Malmuth directed it, and I was watching this and thinking, yeah, like it is, like, it felt like anything that was standard from, like, Canon or something. And I was looking at it and thinking, wow, but Bruce Malmuth did Nighthawks, and that was a great movie.
Well, I'm sorry to badmouth another director.
Oh no, and then I remembered that Bruce Malmuth also did the Steve Guttenberg version of Man Who Wasn't There, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, the fight scenes in this, though, I mean, in some action heroes, you still feel like they got hurt. Am I off, Gabe, that even when he gets hurt, you don't feel like he's actually feeling pain?
Not at all. I mean, you're on point with that. I mean, he gets shot. He just kind of gets thrown back, and he's like, what happened? What happened? You know, he's got these bullets all around him, and I don't know. It's almost like these bullets can't touch me, but I'll duck down just so that I don't freak out Kelly LeBrock. You know, I'll be okay.
Well,
yeah,
you know why the bullets don't touch him is because anyone who shoots a machine gun in this movie has to move the gun back and forth.
I know. That was always the thing that cracked me up, is that nobody knows how to shoot a machine gun in the 80s or 90s. you don't wave a machine gun back and forth like that. I mean, you know what? There's the reason why a weapon has what you call a stock is to brace it over your shoulder, and you know it has these little things on the gun called sights.
Yeah.
You know, you look down those sights and you line up where the bullet might go. But no, people are just, you know, they're like animals from the Muppets shooting a gun.
Woman.
But no, I never felt like, and thinking about, because I just watched Marked for Death, which is what we're going to talk about, and I'm thinking back on, this movie. There's no sense of peril. There's no sense of urgency. It's just him. He's got his 45. He's got his Aikido moves. He's fine. He's a god-like figure in this movie. He's hard to kill. So
he is hard to kill.
That would make a good name for the movie.
They probably came up with that title. As soon as they were done shooting, they went back, they looked at the dailies, and they're thinking, Jesus Christ, this guy can't act worth a shit. He can't even put any effort into the danger that's around him. What the hell? Just call it hard to kill. That explains everything.
Also, I mean, just look at the titles. Die Hard, Hard to Kill.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they're definitely playing off of the Die Hard action.
It was originally, according to IMDb, it was originally called 7 Year Storm. It was playing on his name, Mason Storm. Which is, again, as soon as his name came out, I watched the trailer first, and the trailer comes out, Steven Seagal is Mason Storm. I was like, I was just dying. And we used to hear this all the time. Schwarzenegger is Jack Kruger. And it's great. It's like that wonderful Mystery Science Theater episode, Space Mutiny, where Rev Brown's running around, and they're always making up names for him, like Roll, Fizzle Beef, Big, McLarge, Huge. It's the same thing.
Don, what about you? Did you feel at all like he either was in pain or even cared about the situation he was in? I mean, I think...
Okay, so one of the big things that really that I had a problem with, I mean, among all the little things, was the man was in a coma for 7 years, but he was perfectly tan, perfectly buff, and able to move things around. He didn't even have the whole Beatrix Kiddo wiggle the big toe kind of moment. He just, kind of did it. There was no brain power doing that. He just kind of did it, and then he was able to build his whole training area and do the running, and. Freaking 7 years in a coma, he should be massively atrophied.
No, he just crawls around on the floor a bit, and he uses it's because of the acupuncture and the herbs, and he can write
acupuncture and incense. You betcha.
He can write in
miracle
Chinese.
Cure for comas.
That's right.
You notice how he just got out of a coma. Any slight movement, he should be in constant pain. He should be going, but no, he's just like,
Well,
yep.
For one thing, that's the height of his acting ability. I mean, he Steve Seagal will do a lot of things for you, but he will not stop squinting. And also, it's like, they do that basically, and it's the same thing with the machine guns. It's like they don't have him going because it's just it doesn't make for a very good action movie when time is a factor. And just like the machine guns, I don't know anything about machine guns, but I do know that Rambo made it, which is like one of the greatest damn action movies ever, made it really cool for him to just like constantly have that thing going and never running out of all. I, who is somebody who doesn't even like guns, knows that no, a machine gun is like short, controlled bursts. That's what you do, like. That's how you're supposed to do them. But no, all these movies are just like with the spray that Gabe mentioned also. So.
Well, that's how they can sell that he doesn't get hit by the bullets. The action sequences in here are kind of humorous, but fun, though you don't feel any peril for our hero. One of the things, and Dawn, I want to talk to you on this one, or start with you. Let's talk for a moment of the character Andy Stewart, played by Kelly LeBrock. I feel bad. I feel bad for saying this, but the way they wrote her character, she served no purpose
She served
whatsoever.
no purpose whatsoever. From the introduction of the character, "Hi, JD, you want a little pussy?" I mean, that's the epitome of what her character was, and it was pathetic. I mean,
I-
okay, through the years of all the accusations about Steven Seagal being a misogynist and paying off the sexual harassment charges and blah, 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 it's writing the female characters like that really encouraged that stigma.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was, of course, and the whole putting that in there was, I mean, you were mentioning that all the things to get the women to watch it. Let's face it, there's a lot to get the teenage boys watching it. I know that there's like,
Oh, yeah.
I knew a lot of 14-year-old boys when that happens. Like, did you see that person? Oh my god! Oh my god!
He grabbed her
I
butt.
saw it. Yeah.
Well, it was Kelly LeBrock. All of us who got a crush on her from
Weird Science.
Weird Science.
And Women in Red, and none of us watched
Yes.
Women in Red until we found out she was full frontal in the movie, and then we were like, wait, really? And then we all watched a Gene Wilder movie. Teenage boys, we are not. Teenage boys. Let's face it. If you want to find
Middle-aged boys. What are you talking
if you want
about?
to see find the weakest link of human civilization, go to Teenage Boys. We're not in a very good spot then. So
No, but her character really, I mean, are we off on this, Cole, that her character really served not a lot of purpose? I mean, she's randomly crying. We get a scene where he's gone for like 12 hours. He's not even gone for a full day. And she's going to her friends, and looks like she's holding back tears. Like they want to play an angle of, oh, he left me. But it was like half a day that he was gone, and it was just, all she stood there was screaming, and did she really not need to be there?
No, of course not. I mean, the character is horrible. I mean, it's completely horrible on every level, and I want to follow up on what Dawn said, which is, I followed Seagal's career not closely, and I certainly don't know the man personally. I know people who have met him. It is interesting to me that a lot of the negative press about him came out almost simultaneously with On Deadly Ground as he was doing his promotion for that film, and for the first time really publicly being very outright and vocal about his political views. All of a sudden, there's an awful lot of negative press manifested very quickly. But aside from that, this is a misogynist film. It really is. It's a disappointment after Above the Law, and it doesn't compare to just about anything he did after. I mean, he had Pam Grier in Above the Law, which did the film a great service of having a guy and a girl friends, which not many action movies do, not many movies do. I can think of one, Beverly Hills, right off the bat, and it works. They should do it more often, because whenever they do it, it's freaking awesome. But, a lot of Seagal's leading ladies are very strong. I even like the wife in Out for Justice, actually. I think this film is an anomaly among Seagal's theatrical releases in that it sucks pretty bad,
Well, to be fair now, this is his second feature. This was his second feature, so...
Yeah.
So we do have to give it there, and it's not all bad, but there are just so many things, and it really comes down to the script and the way it was directed. I mean, let's face it, there's one scene in here, and I put it in my notes, near the end, where a knife guy comes up to him and lays the side of the blade on Seagal's arm like, hey, I'm here, you're supposed to turn around and hit me now. He doesn't cut him, he doesn't stab him, and if you look at Kelly LeBrock, she does kind of the, you brute, you brute, you brute, you vicious brute type of hitting on the guy, and Seagal turns around like, oh, I'm going to fight you too. I missed that in choreography class. I felt bad because you can tell they're trying. They're trying to come up with this, a big action film, and they do have a couple big action scenes in here, and they're playing the political angle because, here we have a crooked senator, which, was kind of popular around that time, as everyone has said here. But the script, there's just so many issues with this, like he just drives up to a couple of essays and says, "Hey, you want my Jeep for your car?" And
Oh yeah.
I think those guys got the raw end of that deal, don't you think?
Yeah, those guys, I would be surprised if they survived. Honestly, the weird thing is that the actual handing them the Jeep was not that. Like if these guys were really down and on their luck and stuff, that actually was not out of the realm of possibilities. Yeah, because that's happened a lot of times. You can hear about things like, your car you're driving a stolen car. Like, oh yeah, I figured some guy just gave it to me a couple towns over. But but the fact that it's not just that they're giving him this car. That was the weird part of it, is that they were giving him the car knowing that other people would be chasing him and trying to kill the people in that car.
Well, yeah. Hey, look, there's bullet holes in this Jeep. And I'm like,
even they hear him like, man, this car is jacked up. Like, yeah, don't get in it.
So, it's trying, and it's Seagal's second film, and you can tell they put thought into some of the choreographies, because some of the action scenes, especially when he gets to the senator's house, I did enjoy that. How he comes up and goes, "Oh, well, you're saying it's not fair because I have my gun, so I'll just put my gun down," and then he beats everybody up, and that is badass part. And the 14-year-old boy, as you mentioned, yeah, I really kind of enjoyed that, but there are so many gaping problems with the script. This is the dumbest cops in the world. We get an A-team montage for his training, which he suddenly can break huge boards in the span of, a couple of days because he's got his herbs and his acupuncture. And, further with the Kelly LeBrock character, they have this thing where, did I miss something? These people are like wanted, and they're roaming the streets like, la-da-da, like I'm going into a hotel now and nobody notices me. Did you guys notice that they were like playing, but not playing at the fact she gets framed for her girlfriend's murder, and he's plastered as the crooked cop, yet no one seems to call him out when they see him.
Well, even at the end, first of all, when at the very end of the movie, spoiler room, guys, that's the name of the show, when they arrest the guy, which I thought was a nice touch to have him arrested and not killed. I think that was an alternate ending. I don't think it was planned like that. And they're like, "Oh no, you're good. We saw the tape. You know what? You're good. You're good." And I almost wanted him to start leaving and said, "Oh wait, no, sorry, forgot. The dozen people you murdered in this house." Yeah, but they came after my pet. Still, it's against the law to come to someone's house and murder people. Two wrongs, Steve. Two wrongs. They don't make it right.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where this film has a number of issues. And final thought is, folks, when you want to deliver a flower to your loved one and you're trying to play it off nonchalantly, you shouldn't dress up in your heels and your doomy dress
I know.
And walk past and just go, "Oh, I just wanted to give you a flower." I'm like, really? He's not
That's
that.
totally how you get laid.
It is how you get laid. It's actually part of the reason why I thought maybe it was a dream. When I said earlier, maybe it was a dream sequence or a fantasy sequence, because as soon as the scene cuts out, she's just alone, and that was just, even for this movie. That was like.
Seriously, the only way it could have been better, sorry, you can't see my sarcasm quotes here, is if she would have been in a teddy.
Yeah, I know, right? Oops, I brought a flower for you. I'm like, really?
She already had one of those dresses on where like the top part of it is already like half ripped open. It's like, oh, I just need to grab onto those and.
And let's not forget the big hair either that she had. She must have took hours to tease up while he was sniffing his herbs.
Now don't mock the 80s hair.
Oh, I love the 80s hair. I just got a kick out of it that she comes by and tries to play off like, oh, I was just passing by. And I'm thinking it's going to be a scene where she's saying, well, I was just going to go out with some girlfriends, but I wanted to bring you a flower. No, she comes in, I want to bring you a flower, and she's dressed to the nines like they're going to go out to some fancy dinner or a nightclub, I should say. And she's got that look, and he's just like, oh, flower. I like that. Can I grab your butt now? Because he liked to grab butts. But yeah, there's many things. I mean, from that to the plot holes to the way they wrote the cops to the whole angle of, oh, his kid's not dead type of thing, to a newspaper clipping that has a full picture of the crime scene with the two bodies still in bed. I don't know if you guys caught that, but the newspaper clipping, when he looked at it, there's one of the newspaper clippings where it's the final shot that we saw of those two right after they both got killed and he finally dies. I'm like, wow, that's a good news photographer right there, But so
that's the post.
Yeah,
That was the post.
it is his second one, and while the action scenes were interesting and they were trying something new, this film I think just had a lot of issues. I think we're going to move right on to the second one, which is a far contrast to this one, and I'm not sure if it's just because they got a better writer or director, but the next one that came out in October of 1990 was, and I heard a sigh already, but it's Marked for Death. Now, Marked for Death gives us Seagal once again, this time as John Hatcher, so he doesn't have quite such a dramatic name. And, wow, this is a long synopsis, but basically he's a DEA Chicago agent who returns from Colombia where his partner was killed by a drug dealer when they got ratted out, and as a result he decides to retire. But while he's in retirement, his sister Melissa and Melissa's daughter Tracy, they get into a shootout with Jamaican drug kingpin known as Screwface. And John brings himself out of retirement when Screwface retaliates by attempting to kill them. And after the shooting, John is reunited with two old friends who old friends? The Jamaican cop wasn't his old friend. This thing's all wrong. Anyway, sorry. This synopsis is way off. John Hatcher basically retires after his partner dies. He gets home. He finds out there's drugs even in his quote-unquote small-town city, and he crosses paths with a drug lord, pisses off the drug lord. Drug lord tries to kill his family members, puts his little girl in a coma this time. He's not in a coma, but his niece is in a coma, so he comes out of retirement to go kick the kingpin's ass. That's basically the plot there. That's a lot better than what IMDb has. Dear Lord, who writes these things? Anyway, Marked for Death. Here we have the Jamaicans, and we're dealing with crack cocaine because that was on the rise or in full swing starting in the 90s. Regular cocaine just got too boring. So now we got crack cocaine here. And let's start with you, Gabe. Marked for Death. Your feeling with this film? You said you're a big Seagal fan. How did you feel getting another Seagal film in the same year?
Well, funny thing is, I saw it in '91 because that's when it came on VHS.
Sure.
But I mean, whatever. It's within the same time period. Interesting enough. For some reason, because I'm very technical when it comes to titles.
Sure.
So Steven Seagal. Do I want to watch Above the Law? Do I want to watch Hard to Kill? Do I want to watch Out for Justice? Or do I want to watch, I'm not kidding you, Seagal Takes on the Jamaicans? I always used to call it that. Seagal Fights the Jamaicans. I love this movie. Honestly, this is this is my favorite one, next to Under Siege. Under Siege is like his epic. You know, that's like his biggest adventure ever. Sorry, Under Siege 2, you're not as good, you know. But when it comes to like just the in-your-face, gritty, urban setting, this is his best one. It has the best action. It has a pretty interesting story for its time. It had a pretty good story. It was well done, and it's kind of funny too because, you know, like we talked about, Hard to Kill wasn't very good. It was actually done by Warner Brothers. This one was his only film he ever did with Fox, and it's almost like they looked at Hard to Kill and they said, you know what? We're the studio that made Die Hard. We have to make a much better movie than that piece of shit. Yeah, when I first saw Hard to Kill, I was really into it. I mean, it had...
You mean Mark for Death?
Mark for Death. Yeah, Mark for Death. Hard to Kill was... No, we talked about that. When I saw that movie, just, you know, it had a lot of good shootouts. It had action throughout the movie, not like Hard to Kill, which is an hour into it. No, this movie, I mean, it starts off with a chase, a foot chase, and there's shootouts. There's nudity, lots and lots of nudity. Very interesting bad guys. Great reggae music. You know, and this movie does have a sense of peril, of danger. Mm-hmm. You know, which, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I just saw it, but okay, so the little girl is put into a coma. Did they ever resolve that? Did she ever come out of it?
I don't think they did.
I don't remember. I just
not in the movie, yeah.
No, she was on the upswing. They mention it that she was stable. They mention it for sure.
Okay.
But stable in a coma or stable out of a coma?
Well,
because there's a difference.
I don't know if this movie. I don't know if this one was butchered, but you know, Seagal's first 4 movies, all that stuff was taken out.
Yeah.
You can go through them, and the studio just took all that stuff out. And you can double check me, but that's fact. So
no, it's true, and it shows too.
Yeah, it shows. So I mean, if they had a scene where this girl recovers, I mean, they wouldn't have put it in the movie. But I mean, at the very least, they do mention, you know, she's stable. So
that's the 90s standard of closure. Yeah. Oh, she's stable. Let's move on.
She'll pull up.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really and at the time, the fact that they had at the time I didn't know the guy's name. Again, I was still a kid. But they had the awesome ass-kicking black dude from They Live as
David rules.
The great Keith David, a.k.a. Spawn. I always call him a.k.a. Spawn.
Yeah.
And I love that guy. And even... That's how it became a Keith... See? Wow, how many people do that? David Keith.
It must be all. It must be all their lives because yeah.
That's how I became a fan of this guy. I saw They Live when I was very young, and I saw this film, and I'm like, this guy kicks ass. Yeah. He's got like the best voice. He's a badass. But yeah, I really enjoyed the hell out of that movie. We practically wore out the VHS because my dad and I used to watch it like all the time. And it was just a very satisfying action movie for its time. And then watching it, I watched that movie probably more often than any Seagal film. And to me, it holds up well in the regards that it's a 90s movie, and of course it is dated. But, you know, it still holds up as a really decent action movie. Mm-hmm. The only scene that I used to like it when I was younger because you were walking through that room and there was this nice fancy gun collection, and then he starts cleaning this palm pistol, and I don't know, for some reason I liked that scene when I was younger. I watched it recently on like this scene has absolutely no purpose. Like, none. You know, I could see he's reminiscing about something, okay? Then he just starts cleaning this obscure punk pistol, and then the scene ends. Like, what was the point of that?
Yeah, you thought that maybe it would be foreshadowing for him to use it later,
Yeah,
like he pulls it out or something.
You know,
I suspect the only purpose for that scene is to show the pictures and set up the prior relationship between Keith David and Steven Seagal as former military comrades.
right. But it's like you have that gun, you just cleaned it. You might as well keep it when you're like in a pinch, you know, like a Jamaican corners you, you're out of weapons until you pull out this little punk pistol and you shoot a guy in the eye or something. I don't know. But yeah, I always liked the villain. I liked for its time. I liked the fact that, you know, he had twins. He had twins, and I didn't see that coming back in the day. It's like you cut this fucker's head off, and then all of a sudden his twin comes out of nowhere, and even though they actually do show his twin, they foreshadow or they show his twin in like the shadows in an earlier scene, but. For the time, I thought it was really cool. This evil Jamaican guy had twins.
Yeah,
Screwface. I don't know no Screwface. You know what? That's the one thing I want to point out. The one thing, because this is I definitely remember watching the trailer before I saw the film, and the one line that I always loved was. One guy thought he was invincible, the other guy thought he could fly. They were both wrong.
Yeah.
I was like, that is awesome, I want to see this movie, and then, yeah, you know.
That was a really good delivery of that line, too, when he gave that in the movie, because normally he just gives the lines in the same basic way, just like Schwarzenegger gave his lines in the same. But the way he gave it was so matter-of-fact to Keith David that it was a really good delivery of that line.
It was a really good delivery, and probably one of shows too that he gets better one-liners in this film. Scott, how'd you feel about Marked for Death?
Well, you know, I'm glad Gabe mentioned the that this is done at Fox, because that's a bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I have. For some reason, this was in print long ago, but now you have to do detective work to find it. Okay. Marked for Death did start out as a Warner Brothers movie because he was under contract to Warner Brothers at the time. However, Warner Brothers had 3 films on their slate, and the geniuses that were in charge at the time looked at these films and said, these aren't going to make a dime. Let's sell them. And these were in films that were in active parts of, various different acts of production. Yeah, and they were all wound up being 1990 movies. So, I mean, they were, well on their way when they got sold. But then they, moved over to there, and their budgets increased and everything else. And they got sold to 20th Century Fox. Now, Warner Brothers sold Marked for Death. And here's the thing that was great. I want to say that they sold these 3 movies for, I cannot find the figure today. I want to say it was for something between $30 and $40 million. They sold these 3 movies because they thought, we're not going to make any money off of this. At least now we make $30 or $40 million. Well, Marked for Death not only became Steven Seagal's biggest hit, it made
47 million, I think.
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 times its budget when you look at the worldwide gross.
It was number 1 for a month.
Yeah, it was a big hit, and a lot of people love it and everything like that. I'm going to say, even that's not the lead story, because do you know what those other 2 movies that Warner Brothers sold to 20th Century Fox were that they didn't think were going to make a dime? Edward Scissorhands. Which, of course, made about $100 million, is now a modern classic. People still watch it. And, I love it, Home Alone.
Wow.
Yeah, basically, Warner Brothers said, we're not going to make a dime, and they basically gave up a combined thing of about $500 million in 1990 dollars.
Wow.
So because they gave up this movie, which is originally called Screwface, just like all Seagal's films seem to start out with different titles.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted them to have the uniformal 3-letter thing.
Yeah, and so it seems like they changed it later on because this was originally
Yeah.
called Screwface, the other one was originally called something else. Yeah, and but they sold all those movies and they got it up. I just love that little factoid. It never gets repeated anymore. But if you do detective work, you can find it. That's another nugget from Premiere Magazine back in the day. Marked for Death, though. Okay, sorry about that. I had to go into that.
Oh, glad. That's awesome.
Yeah. Marked for Death is a really good, solid action movie, isn't it? I was watching this movie, and like I said, I was never a big Seagal fan, but I did always remember that this one had about the best reputation of any of his movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people for years were saying this was like the best one, or they would either say that this, Above the Law, or Under Siege was the best one he ever did, usually. And I was watching this like, yeah, you know what? This is, I mean, it's got its corny bits, sure, but it's a solid movie. I mean, you start out at the beginning. I mean, especially looking at it years later, you see like, oh my God, he's like roughing up Danny Trejo.
I know,
in the opening
right?
scene. You know that wouldn't happen. But he goes on and does all this stuff. I think a lot of the reason the movie works is the director, Dwight H. Little, who I often get confused with Tommy Lee Wallace, and both these directors, what they have in common is they're both very underrated. Dwight H. Little directed Halloween 4.
Yes.
Which I think is a really, really good slasher movie. I love
it's
Halloween
a
4.
fucking amazing movie.
The one that introduces to Danielle Harris it was fantastic. And then he
That's
directs.
the one that made me a Michael Myers fan. I never saw the original as a kid, but when I saw that movie, I'm like, it just had the atmosphere of it and just the tone of it was just so inviting as a horror film. I'm like, this movie is badass.
It's great. It still holds up. And then he also did. People have mixed feelings for it. I happen to love it. He did the Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund. That one.
Oh, it's a great movie. You should check out the soundtrack. It's great.
Oh, it's so good, and with Jill Shulen in there, and I love Jill Shulen. And it's so. I mean, I think he had done a couple action things beforehand. But I mean, this was like his big action movie, and after this, he did Cole, for you, he did Rapid Fire right after this with
Yeah.
which I still need to see, but I hear it's awesome.
Well,
I'll mail you the DVD, man.
No, it's okay. I think I actually have it here. Actually,
and for those of you who did not grow up in the 80s or around the 90s, this director just recently directed an episode of Arrow called Public Enemy, and he's directed about 20 episodes of Bones. So he's still actively directing. He also has directed 2 episodes of Sleepy Hollow. So he's still directing.
He does a ton of TV these days.
Yeah,
he did some theatrical films. He did the Tekken movie from a couple years ago, which wasn't. I don't blame him for that one. I actually think Anaconda 2 is actually kind of a fun movie. He did that one. But I mean, this is a solid director, and he was at the top of his game here. Is my point.
Yeah.
He did a really great job with this movie.
He directed some episodes of 24. He's a good guy in my opinion.
There you go.
Day 5 too, season 5. Oh shit, this guy's awesome.
Now, what was really interesting about this movie, where you kind of got that it's going back to that Above the Law, where it's a little more sophisticated, a little more deep than Hard to Kill, was like this early scenes. And man, I actually kind of wish there was some sort of a prequel to this movie, or a predecessor or something, because he goes into this confessional and has this heart-to-heart with this the unseen priest on the other end of the thing. I don't know what they call it because I'm not Catholic, but it's the divider or whatever it is.
Confessional, yes.
That would be the confessional, yes.
I know, but they have a little spot that divides them anyway. And he's like talking about, I've taken drugs, I've planted evidence, I've slept with informants. I'm like,
Yes.
really, dude? I mean, my one regret of the movie was that you never got a hint of that behavior in the rest of the movie. Is that I wanted to see like
Really?
I would love to see that. No,
Really?
What?
He's blowing people away, and he totally doesn't give a shit about the collateral damage throughout the whole movie as long as it's not his own family.
I know, but what I'm talking about is that that bit of himself where he would be willing to actually like plant evidence and like do the drugs and like as like what you would do if you were actually like infiltrating and stuff like that. There's no infiltration here, so he doesn't have to do any of that. But I wish that he could have, because I would have loved to see that, that struggle in himself, I mean, let's face it. Well, okay, yeah, he's probably not the best person to emote struggle, but you know what I mean,
Oh,
Yeah, we don't get the struggle. We just get to see him and Keith David tear up a jewel shop and walk away.
Yeah. And it's pretty good. And, I mean, I think this movie really goes further, because when you look at it, it does have the same basic plot as a lot of mid-'80s, early '90s action films. I've been watching this Roku channel, B-Movie TV, a lot, and they are really big into showing these movies. And so, like, within the last 3 weeks, I must have seen, like, 5 movies where it's got this thing about this guy comes home to his old neighborhood. It's always a white guy. And he's like, and he says, like, oh, these street gangs are roughing up the neighborhood. I guess I gotta fix this myself. It's always that same plot, but it never really feels like it's as generic as those other movies, because it goes so much further. It has the angle with the Jamaican gangs, and you've got voodoo and Santeria stuff going on there, which is really interesting. I'm trying to squint to see my stuff, my notes here, and I can't really make them out because it's dark in here. But it's like, I think that there's like a lot of really great stuff in this movie. There's corny stuff too. For instance, I think even though it was a revelation to us, I think he should have seen the thing about the big plot twist about Screwface being twins, because he is told point blank he has 2 heads and 4 eyes. That is the secret to his power. Yeah, that tells you flat out there's two of these people. Now, I didn't know at the time that it meant that they were twins. I thought it could mean that there's one person pretending to be Screwface at one place and one person actually being him, or it could be something else. But that tells you point blank, and they're going into the club and looking to like kill Screwface and stuff. And there's actually like a band, a pretty good reggae band, singing a song about them going into the club and trying to kill Screwface at the same time that they're doing it live on the stage. And so when he's approaching this girl, he's like, hey, I'm looking for Screwface. I just wanted her to say, I know, there's like a band singing about it and everything.
Steven Seagal actually had a hand in writing that song.
Did he really? It was actually a good song. It's actually a good song.
That's actually one of the reasons why I like the movie. I love it when that song comes on. And then when it ends, it plays the same song. I'm like, yes, I love it.
I know he did blues albums over the years. I didn't hear any of his. I didn't know. I've never heard them. I would see them come up for like review in like Blues Review magazine, because I like the blues a lot, and they were never kind. But I don't know if that was because of the album or because of a previous like prejudice against Seagal or whatever.
Sure.
I just know that they aren't received well. But but that song's a good song,
Yeah, the Jim Crow song, or that it is a good song. I like reggae music anyway, so I like the soundtrack to this film.
It's just a really it's a really energetic movie. It has a lot of energy to it, and it keeps on moving. It kind of keeps you guessing. I mean, there's the other corny bit I wanted to mention is that somehow this woman is in the house and she doesn't hear what must have been a really pretty elaborate operation to arrange all like hundreds of candles, light them, set up an altar in like on the downstairs while she's like up taking a shower, getting ready for bed. Like she didn't like really. Okay, you don't hear. Like, I mean, eventually someone's gonna like nudge something, and like you're gonna hear something about this. It looked like that was pretty elaborate, didn't it?
It was pretty elaborate, but he had a lot of people helping him, and it is his voodoo magic, so he had a little extra.
Oh, we all know that the voodoo magic wasn't real.
Oh, sure, it wasn't real. Dawn, what about you? Now, there was an actress in here. I'd love to hear your initial thoughts, your kind of feelings with Marked for Death, and there's an actress in here that you really were happy to see.
Yeah, Scott mentioned Danielle Harris. Was it Scott or was it Gabe?
Yes.
Mentioned Danielle Harris. I loved seeing her. I forgot she was in this.
Yeah.
I always think she's brilliant, along with Keith David. Just always a pleasure to see those two in anything. This was not one of my favorite films.
Really?
Yeah. There's not. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it necessarily. It's your typical Steven Seagal kind of. You know what you're gonna get when you see that movie. I really thought part of the problem for me is I'm kind of all about the character, and I'm all about how the character makes you feel, and if you can connect with the character. And starting with that sequence that Scott had mentioned about Steven Seagal being in the confessional talking about the things he'd done, that set up my view of the character immediately as this amoral piece of shit cop, dirty cop, who finally couldn't stand being dirty anymore and retired before he got caught, and then went vigilante. It kind of I'm already gone. There's no sympathy there.
Sure.
It already, and I want you to convince me that it's a better movie than I think it is. So please do. Aside from Keith Davis and Danielle Harris, who are always perfect, convince me that it's a better movie than I think it is, please.
Well, I just want to say, like, really quick, is that that is something I noticed in all these action movies that I was watching. The Steven Seagal things, the other things I told you I was watching on the B Movie TV and stuff, is that it's again the difference between fantasy and reality. I think we have too many people, especially with action movies, when they go really nuts. And I mean, these films are such fantasy and everything like that. Example, I've talked about like the machine guns and everything else, but if you have an action film where you hear he's a cop who doesn't play by the rules, you're like, ooh, yeah, he's a rebel, he's going out there. In real life, if you hear he's a cop who doesn't play by the rules, oh my God, get him out of here!
Exactly. And that's exactly the point. These are the people that, at least for those of us who are teenagers at this time, these were the people who were being put forth by Hollywood as the new heroes for the time, or the new anti-heroes for the time. These were the action stars, and these were the characters who we were supposed to be sympathizing with, the crooked, dirty cops, the morally compromised, and that's why it pulled me out of the movie. Not because, I mean, the directing was great, the editing wasn't bad, the action sequences were better, definitely, but right away at that beginning with that scene, oh, well, this is just a dirty, shitty cop, now he's a vigilante.
Sure. And
what's the point?
And that's kind of a contrast a little bit to what we saw of some, not all, but some of our 70s cop heroes, where they were the only good guy in the department.
Yeah.
And they had to go and be bad because that's the only way that they could defeat the bad guys was possibly break a rule, and they felt really horrible about any type of rule breaking.
And because Steven Seagal is incapable of emoting, there is no visible conflict in him. I mean, I'm sure he tries his best.
You know what? I just want to interrupt.
He's got that eyebrow frown thing going on sometimes. And also, I recognize he tries it.
You gotta also remember the ponytail.
I've gotta love the ponytail.
In the scene when the daughter gets shot and the mother's like, "This is my baby," he turns around. It's in slow motion. He turns his head so he can't show any emotion, but that ponytail just swings in the most dramatic fashion. So
He emotes through his ponytail. We've
Mhm.
learned Seagal's secret.
Attention Academy, for your consideration, Best Actor, Steven Seagal's ponytail.
Nice. No, you're completely right though, Don, about the anti-hero. And because I think it's because it worked in some of the other more popular action films that they thought that's the direction they should take with nearly all heroes, but they don't realize that those classic ones, they were written better than here. I mean, here he just delivers all his dirty dirt to the priest and walks off, and yeah, that's it. Now I'm a vigilante. Cole, how'd you feel about Marked for Death?
I love this film, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gabe. It's a pleasure to meet you, Gabe. I think
Hey,
Gabe
good to meet you.
summed up a lot of my opinions.
Sure.
And Scott had a lot of great things to say too, specifically about Dwight H. Little, who brought a lot of his background directing two rather successful horror movies into this.
Sure.
I mean, this is certainly only the only horror Aikido movie ever made, and one of the only legitimate horror action movies that are, well, let me rephrase, horror martial arts movies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great martial arts movie. I'm a bit of a martial artist. Obviously when you make movies and you're poor, movies have to come first, or you'll never make them. So martial arts went by the wayside at a young age. But Steven Seagal is a martial artist. And I just want to say, while I have respect for my movie reviewer peers, I do want to express respect for the man, because he is a sensei. And I've had senseis, and these guys don't show a lot of emotion.
Sure.
And in fact, when they fight, they don't show a lot of emotion. My lead sensei, the gentleman who I was getting picked on by about 5 large people at one point early on in my youth, and my sensei said, you pick the biggest one, you break his nose, and the others will back off. And there was no irony. He didn't read that line like he was Bruce Willis. It was just the truth. And it worked. And I see a lot of that in Seagal. And, he's not Hollywood. When Lorne Michaels talks about, boy, the worst host we ever had was Steven Seagal. Well, I'm sure he was. It doesn't surprise me at all, All of that said, Marked for Death, I love. It's one of many Seagal movies that are like right on the border of perfection. I like Out for Justice. I like On Deadly Ground, Above the Law, Under Siege. Everything through Exit Wounds is pretty damn good. And this movie feels like it has an evil spell on it. That's what I like. It's again, like Scott said, Dwight H. Little's touch. The whole thing feels like it has a really dark spell on it that permeates everything, including, as Don mentioned, the lead character, which Don is right. He is a scumbag, which also brings to light my opinion on Steven Seagal's acting abilities, which I think are amazing. I worked with an assistant manager at the grocery store where I do my day job for about 2 years, and he was from New York. And the reason I bring this up is because I very firmly believe that Seagal's New York accent in Out for Justice is the real deal. And he gets made fun of a lot for it. But I've known New Yorkers. So I just want to say, I think the man, for what he did, and when you put him next to his peers, like all the people I mentioned earlier, I think his performances are pretty interesting. And I think his performance in this is interesting. I'm just going to run down some of the strengths right away. Basil Wallace. A fun game to play with this movie is to see if he plays the twins differently from scene to scene, which I believe he does. I think after a while you can pick out the differences in the twins. The cinematography by Rick Waite is phenomenal, coupled with the editing by O. Nicholas Brown, which is amazing. Seagal's fight scenes, these are his best until On Deadly Ground, I think. I think almost James Newton Howard's score is really good. I think maybe the reason this movie works so well, the writers are the producers also. I mean, maybe that's part of the reason there's a uniformal sort of vision, towards it. The whole narrative is cohesive. I mean, it really fits. I love Tom Wright from Creepshow 2. Thanks for the ride, lady, as the good cop, the cop who partners with them.
Oh, I didn't realize it was him.
Yeah, that's Tom Wright. I mean, the one negative thing that can be said is Keith David, he sets up the plot and then he's diminished.
Yeah.
But you know what? Watch Men at Work, which opened the same year. I think maybe. I mean, I really feel like that was Emilio Estevez being like, "Okay, Keith David, we're gonna give you the best role we can write because we can."
Well, they give him the best line. They give him the best line in movie history. Oh, look at that! Someone gone and thrown away a perfectly good white boy.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
Short, I love On Deadly Ground. I'm sorry, Marked for Death. My bad.
No.
3-letter Seagal titles.
Yeah,
They get stuff, but I love Marked for Death, man. I've watched it. As Gabe said, I wore out my VHS, literally, to the point where there was like 3 white lines, that would run through the full frame tape. And having watched it full frame for the first time last month, thank you for the influence, Mark. This show has been great. Brought me a lot of entertainment, but I love this film. 4 stars out of 5. I got to knock it down a notch just because Keith David's character is way too muted in the last half. But
yeah, it's like they set up his character, but then we're giving him he's getting a little bit too equal to Seagal's character. Yeah. We've got to back him up, and that kind of happens to Keith David in a lot of his movies. Actually, that's why I was always glad when I heard that he was going to be the voice of Spawn, because at least I'm like, he's got a lead. Finally, he's got a major lead where he's not kind of standing in the shadow of some other performers. But I will say for Marked for Death, this one is better by a lot than Hard to Kill. And though we have mentioned Steven Seagal and how he doesn't emote, you are right in that his training kind of he's been trained, and his discipline is to not really emote a lot. But I will say I liked his performance as John Hatcher more than Storm.
Yeah,
he actually does feel like he's putting some emotion in, at least near the end when he's in the fight scenes. He actually seems like he's actually feeling a little pain rather than getting shot in his bedroom, standing up, getting shot again, and going, "Oh, you shot me, and I'm still going to bend your hand." It seems like he has advanced in this film. And what this film kind of had a feel to, I don't know if any of you here are familiar with, but Angel Heart.
Oh, I love Angel Heart.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Angel Heart's a fantastic voodoo film, and I loved how it seemed like late 80s, early 90s, voodoo was really kind of becoming the thing to throw into, and I always found I always found it fascinating. I mean, he's not the first or last. Seagal is not the first or last to take on the Jamaicans. Let's think of Predator 2, where we had the Jamaicans as well being major drug runner guys. And so this kind of had a feel of that. I liked the villain Screwface in this quite a bit. This felt like the villain you want in an action film like this. Wouldn't you say? I mean, he does. With the film, the way they set up, you're like, he's a drug kingpin, and he plays it like a drug. Basil Wallace plays it like he's a major drug kingpin, like the stereotype.
He's great.
And he's fantastic in it with the eyes thing that he does, and he's walking around, with a sword and everything. And this villain definitely was a lot better, I thought, set up.
Now I have power.
Now I have power.
I remember, and you never know how much of this was the hype around the era, because you'll remember there was like lots of, this is around this period when we're going back 25 years was when everybody was talking about the war on drugs,
Yep.
And gang activity was really exploding. And I remember seeing a talk show with like with this ex-DEA agent who's like who was at that point like some like 20-year veteran or something. Says, "What was the worst thing you ever saw?" Somebody actually asked him. on the job. He says, well, he says, and what's like the most vicious thing? And he said, it was around the time this movie was made. He said, the Jamaican gangs are really scary. And he says, I remember we found a bathtub, like a basin bathtub, where we figured one or two people had been killed because we found body parts chopped up in it.
Mm-hmm.
Then when our forensics people went through it, they found out that no, actually there was about 16 to 18 people in the tub. And I heard that, and then this movie came out like right after. I'm like, this guy's so Screwface was like extra scary at this point for me. Now, whether this story was true or embellished a bit, I don't know. It was kind of a crazy time, and of course, daytime talk shows, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But as a 14, 15-year-old kid who's hearing this, living in the small town Minnesota, yeah, I haven't seen that much of the world.
What I liked about Screwface is his character. I liked it because his villain sold you on. Wouldn't you say, Don, that he sold you on the fact he believing in the voodoo? He wasn't just using it as a tool or whatnot. This guy really is believing he's immortal and everything with it. Didn't he at least give a very convincing performance there of how you bought into, yeah, this guy really thinks he's all that in the voodoo
Absolutely. Part. He definitely... Basil Wallace definitely does an excellent job of convincing the audience that he believes fully and wholeheartedly in the voodoo, in the magic, and that he has this power. And part of that too is he's got his followers believed, and once you've built yourself up so far, how can you not believe? Because
right.
But they did a pretty good job of that, and then they did an excellent job of making sure that they were taking out their opponents in the most horrific way possible too.
Yeah, the fear factor in there, you feel it. I mean, these bad guys, especially in contrast, that's why I wanted to do these two movies, because it's amazing. Same actor, kind of similar genre, yet two contrasting films. Here, your bad guys felt like bad guys. I mean, I'm sorry, but Sandler and the others in Hard to Kill,
they were so generic.
They felt like punks.
Yeah.
They just felt like punks. They didn't really feel like these guys who are all controlling and everything.
Yeah.
But in this one, these bad guys kind of scare you. And especially in the 90s, because you're right, it has the blatant war on drugs theme that you did get during the 90s. Not only...
Oh, that was nonstop. That was like, you could blanket that. From every movie from 85 to 95, you could blanket that across it,
And I think, too, because people are kind of horrified by voodoo. It's an attack on religion, too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, here's this voodoo, it's gonna come attack the nice Christian peoples.
Yeah.
It's that fear of an alien religion and an alien culture that maybe their faith is stronger, and that's why they're being so horrible, and that's why they keep killing people, and they're still getting away with it. It's a really basic fear.
Mm-hmm.
Voodoo scared the crap out of me back then.
It should.
It should. And I live down here in Florida right now, where voodoo, I don't know, but we do have Santeria.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that we have that, I don't mean that there's like a few things. I've actually known people who grew up with Santeria down here, and I don't even get out that much. So, I mean, like, the fact that I know people who's like, oh, no, we had Santeria, so you'd have the, the animal sacrifice here, and then you do this spell to see. I'm like, what? It was like crazy. It was like all of a sudden, like, oh, you didn't realize? Yeah, you're living in Serpent in the Rainbow now, Scott.
That was...
It's a complete different thing. Basil Wallace is so good at that too, and he was also. I was checking his IMDb. He was also in Return of the Living Dead 3, which I love.
Yes.
He was the Riverman in that. He was like the wake up caca guy. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but this one is just... Well, voodoo in general, I mean, that's why I mentioned Angel Heart, because Angel Heart scared the crap out of me. And then Serpent in the Rainbow, that film is just freaking scary. I mean, voodoo... voodoo
and
is...
the Believers as well.
The Believers?
Yep.
I mean, voodoo was actually... played with for a while in films, and I thought it was a very effective tool because it was something that and I think you'll all agree, not a lot of people either understood or knew a lot about. You knew it existed, you weren't quite sure about some of the practices in that, so when you would see them, it was like, oh my God. Not only that, but these people had the biggest rooster in movie history. I mean, did it not? Wasn't that rooster that they sacrificed huge? I gotta mention the rooster. That thing, I'm looking at that going, holy crap, where'd they find that thing? but yeah, you had the anti-drug message. I mean, especially with the news person who was explaining to the Caucasians in the audience and those who might not live in the more questionable neighborhoods what a posse was.
Yeah. The posse.
I chuckled a little at that, so there are some cheesy moments, but here's another thing, and Cole, I want to talk to you real quick as director with it. I think the difference with this Hard to Kill, and that is Seagal doesn't get as much screen time as in Hard to Kill. They balance screen time a little more, don't they, with other characters rather than just being the Steven Seagal show in Marked for Death? Don't they balance it out a little more? Or at least it's not just him?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a step back in the right direction. This is for sure a better movie than Above the Law, just because Above the Law is hindered with... I mean, if you guys go back and watch it again, you can tell there's things that, like the Indian convenience store owner, just hideous 80s things like that. Marked for Death, while not as politically intelligent or sophisticated, is a better film. And I think at this point Seagal is beginning to, I don't know, maybe get a little bit more control, maybe the best control he ever had. He's a good middle range guy. I think once he's got all control, it kind of weakened the impact of his films a little bit. But I'm sorry, what was the initial question, Mark?
My question with it was with this film, do you think they balanced out screen time a little more among other characters?
Oh yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know. I really know. I think it was just a better use of him. It's for sure got his best stunts of any.
Right.
And I'm including like Under Siege. I think the way it was shot shows you the majority of his martial arts and the majority of his work, and it's by far the closest thing you can get to one of his Aikido demonstrations. But of course, you'll never know what the man can do until you really see him fight. It's just the way these guys are. I saw my sensei fight twice, and it was a 2-move bout. You couldn't even see anything. It wasn't a martial arts display. It was the other guy was down. So I think he was used wisely, but I would argue the supporting characters are weaker than Hard to Kill. It's just a better movie. It's just better made. The way everything about Voodoo shows up for 2 scenes and then she's gone. Like I said, I think Keith David vanishes. I think, those are the weaknesses of the film, which don't detract from it much. I would actually, I guess, disagree. I think this is Seagal's best film. I mean, I think he looks good here. I think his performance is good. I think he gets a lot of screen time. I think they give him just enough romantic, interludes, like maybe something might happen if they ever decided to do a sequel, but...
Yeah, it was...
I just love it. I love it. I love the way Seagal. I think this is Seagal's show. I would actually disagree, not respectfully, of course, but
No, that's fine. That's
I would
fine.
say this is Seagal's show, and I love him for it. This is a great Seagal movie.
Maybe it's just with the writing or the fact that he always wasn't alone fighting. He was actually working with people, whereas in Hard to Kill,
I see. Gotcha.
you know,
Yeah,
whereas in Hard to Kill, it was pretty much all Seagal all the time, and here
Yeah.
he at least had other characters doing stuff where it wasn't just Seagal against the world. I mean, he
You know
does do
what?
them.
I agree 100%, and I rescind everything I just said.
because that's where I was going with it, is that in Hard to Kill, I mean, I know he was kind of the focus of the plot, but I mean, he pretty much, you felt, did everything on his own. I mean, I know Kelly LeBrock's character went to get a phone number, but that was about it. In this one,
Yeah, in this movie, he has more capable allies.
yes.
You know, people who can fight alongside with him.
Yeah. Oh, good point. That's
Yeah.
a good point, guys. You're right. I totally agree.
Well,
Instead of like Hard to Kill, where he teams up with his own partner who gets killed real quick, you know, and says, "I love you, Sonny," and that's his end game right there.
well, not to mention it, but the female, I mean, we get the female scientist in here who doesn't become a romantic interest, which I was kind of happy to see.
Yeah.
But
Her character is pretty much just there for exposition, though.
it is. She's there to help explain more of the voodoo stuff.
That's
Which,
Joanna Pacula, isn't it?
yes, I think so.
Or
Uh,
Pacula,
but-
how to pronounce
But
it.
at least she was intelligent, and you know, they wrote her character to be, you know, something other than you brute, you vicious brute.
Yeah.
You know, in this one,
Yeah.
she at least, you know, she's like figuring some of this stuff out, or at least educating our dumb men on, yeah, this is voodoo, guys, and this is what's
And the
going
performance
on.
is pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we don't get a lot of female characters in here. It's a male-heavy cast, though. We do get Gabe in this opening, the drug bust where they feel like they need to break all the furniture. We do get actually a naked female who starts taking shots at our cops. I mean, that's something that you did see quite often in action films. Does that surprise you a little bit when you see her and she actually shooting at our heroes?
It did when I first saw it, and it kind of still does, because, you know, when I first saw it as a I think I was 10 when I finally saw it. First thing you notice as a 10-year-old, oh, boobs. And she's like, oh, you know, she's like, oh, no mas. And all of a sudden, pa, pa, pa. And the way she closes the door, she kicks the door with the meanest, you know, bitch face of all time. It's like, she's like this victim, she's a victim, but then pulls out her gun, starts blasting, kicks the door, like, don't fuck with me.
Yeah.
Fool. So, that was quite surprising at the time, and it's still kind of surprising now, because, you know, you look at her and she's just, oh, this poor little stripper, you know, like, oh, she's caught in all this craziness. She's helpless. Oh no, wait, she just killed Seagal's partner. She's a badass.
Yeah.
Okay.
That there's actually a similar part too in another film. You know, it's easy to forget he was in this movie, but he was the main bad guy, Machete.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, which is I had my issues with the sequel, but I actually loved the original Machete.
Oh,
And in the opening scene, Seagal is there, and she's got like the naked girl, and you know, when I saw that scene in Marked for Death, I was kind of reminded of that, and I was wondering, like, I don't know, I guess you can kind of think it's like just the standard thing that's going to happen in an action film. But actually, part of me wondered, like, you know, Seagal was in this scene. You know, did they put that in there as kind of like a little nod to Marked for Death or something like that?
Well, it had that kind of feel to it when I saw it in Machete too. And I'm watching this and I'm like, wow. Dawn, did that surprise you?
Maybe it was, because it's like, hey, remember that one Seagal movie we had that was successful here at Fox? Let's go back and watch that movie and add some naked girls.
Don,
Nice connection. I didn't even make that. That was good.
Don, I want to get your thought on that real quick. I mean, we don't have a lot of female characters in here. Most of them are kind of on the side, but that one little bit really surprised me. Did that surprise you too in this a little bit? I mean, the fact that she maybe was serving more of a purpose than just showing the nudity to the young boys in the crowd?
I'm trying to rack my brain here, because the scene of the naked drug whore does not, shooting at the cops doesn't seem like a unique thing, and I'm trying to draw. I'm trying to think of different movies where we've seen things like that. Like Point Break, but that came out, I think, the year after.
I think so.
I don't remember if we saw something like that in Scarface, which was in the 80s. I don't think it's necessarily new, but I definitely think it was far more blatant. Which again.
Well, most of this film is, though. It is more gritty. It is more a bit. Old school exploitation action almost.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not a bad thing.
No.
But it's just Seagal was always more mainstream than exploitation.
Right.
Which is why it seems more surprising, maybe.
Right, and well, that's what I'm kind of gearing towards. Is the fact is for a a mainstream film. This thing has a lot of those elements of old exploitation action films, which, you got, like you mentioned, you've got the cop who just is gritty and he's dirty. He's a dirty guy. He's done some bad things in that, and you've got some of the blatant nudity in here and the excessive squibs that blow lots of blood. Lots and lots of blood when the guys are shot. So yeah, that's what it's going to go. Is that it just for a widescreen film to have a scene like that, and there's a couple other scenes later on too that just kind of surprised me for it. That they went that route with a film like this.
Little started as an exploitation filmmaker. I mean,
Sure.
And I do truly believe that a lot of the people who start as exploitation, most of them want to move beyond it just because they're going to get more money, they get to do more stuff. But I'm always of the opinion that you never really truly forget the lessons you learned. I don't even think someone like Ron Howard forgets the lessons he learned on exploitation films. I think everybody keeps them so that obviously Dwight H. Little isn't going to do this kind of thing when he does, say, like Free Willy 2, which he did. He's not gonna have that. He's not gonna have the scene where
that whale was exploited, man.
The whale knocks on the door and there's a topless hooker there, like, oh, sorry. But he's good. But he's going to. But he's going. This is really the first movie. This is the first big budget movie he did.
Right.
Let's say that. As far as having a higher. He was in a higher pay grade, but you know what? You don't really forget where you come from that much,
yeah, and that shows through for Marked for Death. And while you might have a main character in here that you might not like, you got to say the action scenes were directed better. It's a more fluid film. It does fall into a lot better, just multiple viewings, I think, than Hard to Kill.
Did you like it, Mark?
I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed Marked for Death a lot more than Hard to Kill. I found it hard to get through Hard to Kill.
Yeah!
Hard to watch.
It was hard to watch.
I told Don while I was watching it, it's an endurance test.
Well, because I mentioned to Don, because Don stopped by my house when I just was finishing watching it, and I'm like, man, I remember these movies being so much better when I was younger. And compared to the two, Marked for Death is the superior film. You know, even with some of its cheesiness and its blatant drug thing, which we've covered a film like that before that had the blatant anti-drug thing in I Come for Peace, Come in Peace.
Yeah.
So I mean that's very prevalent. Like someone said here that the war on drugs, you know, the whole drugs problem was in full swing because everybody was so excessive in the 80s. You know, so that was thrown in here and a little messagey, but just as an action film to watch, Marked for Death is a lot better film, and so I think all of us are in agreement of the two. If you were going to watch them for Steven Seagal films, I would watch Marked for Death. You're not missing anything not watching Hard to Kill, unless you want to be a completionist with Seagal films, but you can see some improvement in his acting. You know, he actually
He's putting more danger.
He's putting more danger.
Also, the bad guys, even the slightest henchmen, are just more threatening.
Yeah.
Or you know, they have no fear. You have that one guy who is so loyal to Screwface that he literally would rather say, "Go find them your fucking self and jump out a window," before he, you know, breaks under pressure and tells Seagal where his boss is at. So,
well, I mean, yeah, and it's like Screwface says to the one guy, "Who do you fear more, him or me?" You know, and they're all more afraid of their guy, and that's what the thing is, that he has to prove he has the bigger, the greater magic and stuff like that. And it kind of does remind you of, I mean, there's again fantasy and reality. This thing is so far removed from reality. All these movies are, but it does remind you of the type of people that we're dealing with today when you have like terrorists where they're not really afraid to die.
Right.
You know, I mean, that was something we had no familiarity with in 1990.
Yeah.
You know, when Steven Seagal, I mean, again, total fantasy, but when Steven Seagal is pitted against people who aren't afraid to die, you're like, shit, what are you doing? Yeah. You don't care. You know?
Yeah. So of the two, I think we're all in agreement. Watch Marked for Death before you watch Hard to Kill. Just for the sheer fact it is a better action film overall. So I think we're going to wrap it up tonight. I want to thank you for this discussion, everybody here. I hope everyone listening got some insight to it. We weren't hating on Seagal. It is his early film, but we're just mentioning the issues that were more with the film itself than with the man. Depending on how you feel about his politics and stuff, those all fall into his later films, I think. So, but we're going to roll down the aisle here. Just everybody plug your stuff real quick. Cole, go ahead. Why don't you start with you, sir?
All right, man. I'm on Facebook, Cole Meredith, and Horror Roar, where I post a lot of my original movie-based art, obviously horror-based, also Shadows and Lovers Productions. I also just want to apologize quickly. I mentioned that the lead actress in Marked for Death was, I thought I enjoyed her role because she wasn't a love interest, and then later said she wasn't well enough developed. So I just wanted to apologize for that double standard to our fans. I totally acknowledge it. My bad.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, you bet. Dawn, go ahead.
Well, first I want to say thank you for giving me more to think about. I'll probably attempt a review of Marked for Death with some different perspectives. I don't know if it'll actually change my opinion or not, but it's good to have to be able to look at it with some different thoughts in mind. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find me in theaudience.net.
Fantastic. And Gabe, go ahead, sir.
Okie dokie, so you can find me on YouTube, Stuffed Burrito Entertainment, where I do occasional movie reviews, a lot of comic book hauls, and just random stuff. And please follow me on Twitter, Stuffed Burrito E, because, you know, entertainment is just too long of a word to put in a Twitter name. I put a lot of, you know, random sarcastic tweets that I think you will all enjoy. Thank you very much once again for letting me be a part of this. Anytime you get to talk about action movies and reminisce on how good or bad they were, it's always good to do it with good people, and you guys are awesome. So thank you for having me. And remember, audience, it's fun to make fun of Steven Seagal over the internet, but I don't recommend saying it to his face.
Yes!
Well
That's what
put.
I'm talking about.
Well put. And Scott, go ahead, sir.
I'm not gonna make fun of him to his face. No. I mean, I might have issues. I will. No, as I said, pudgy man here. But yeah, you can catch me at movieocrity.com when I'm not kind of wrapped up in myself. It's where I upload all my writings and stuff that I'm on. I need to update that more. But movieocrity.com is where you can find it. You can also catch my web series Movieocrity on Vimeo, and then most of the episodes are on YouTube, but all of them are on Vimeo. And just look up, if you like that kind of stuff, just kind of type that little Movieocrity word in everywhere, and you can find me at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and probably a lot of other social apps that I never even realized I signed up for. So.
Nice. And as always, you can find our past episodes on iTunes. We are there, and on Stitcher Radio, as well as Special Mark Productions. You can go to our archive there, find the Google Hangout only episodes we did, and all of our audio podcast versions, as well as interviews I've done, and movie reviews for We Live Film, and all my crap. But you get also links to all these lovely people's work out there. Thank you again for listening, folks. We are growing in slowly but surely in RSS feed viewers, so I appreciate that. We got a lot of traffic. I love the support we get. We're getting more people coming to the site every time, and we appreciate you listening to us babble about films that are 25 years old as well as films of today. But you don't need those other damn podcasts. You can come right here. You've got horror, sex, freaks, and violence. But most of all, you get spoilers, because we do spoil the movies, but our conversation is definitely fresh.